I knew the second I saw the pink envelope in my mailbox that my day was about to get worse. The HOA logo stared back at me like a warning label, and I felt my jaw clench as I tore it open right there on my front lawn in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My name is Vincent Quigley, and I had just bought this 1920s craftsman bungalow 6 months ago, pouring every cent of my savings into what I thought would be my dream home. The letter was signed by Patricia Henderson, the HOA president, and it was 3 pages of complaints typed in aggressive, bold font. My house was an eyesore that negatively impacted property values. The peeling paint was unacceptable. The overgrown yard was bringing down the entire neighborhood's aesthetic. They were giving me 30 days to remedy the situation or face daily fines of $200. I stood there reading it twice, feeling heat rise up my neck. Sure, the place needed work. That was the whole point. I bought it as a fixer-upper because I could not afford anything move-in ready in this market. I was a freelance architect, which meant my income was decent but irregular, and I had been carefully budgeting to tackle the renovations in phases. The house had good bones, a solid foundation, and incredible original woodwork inside. It just needed some serious cosmetic attention. What really got me was the timing. I had literally just submitted my renovation plans to the city planning office 2 days ago. I was ready to start. But now here was Patricia Henderson, acting like I was deliberately ruining her precious neighborhood. I walked up my creaking front steps and went inside, dropping my bag and the hateful letter on the kitchen counter. The interior was actually in better shape than the exterior. I had spent the last few months stripping wallpaper, refinishing the original hardwood floors, and updating the electrical system. But none of that showed from the street, which was apparently all Patricia cared about. My phone buzzed. It was my friend Marcus, asking if I wanted to grab dinner. I texted back that I was dealing with HOA drama, and he called immediately. What did they do now? Marcus knew all about my property hunt and how thrilled I had been to finally close on this place. They sent me a nastagram saying my house is lowering property values and giving me 30 days to fix everything or get fined $200 a day. That's insane. You just bought it. Tell me about it. I have permits pending and a contractor lined up to start next month. But apparently that's not fast enough for Patricia Henderson. Marcus laughed. Oh man, Patricia, she's legendary. My cousin lives in that neighborhood and said she once tried to fine someone for having the wrong shade of white on their mailbox. You're kidding. Nope. She's been HOA president for like 8 years. Total control freak. I rubbed my eyes. I need to figure out what to do here. I can't afford to pay fines while also doing renovations. Can you talk to her, show her your plans or something? I guess I have to try. The next morning, I put on a clean shirt and walked 3 houses down to Patricia Henderson's address, which was listed on the letterhead. Her house was a perfect suburban colonial painted in cream with dark green shutters. The lawn looked professionally maintained, and there were matching potted plants on either side of the front door. A silver Lexus sat in the driveway with a vanity plate that read, Hopres. I rang the doorbell and heard a small dog yapping inside. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-50s wearing a white linen pantsuit and holding a tiny Pomeranian. Yes. She looked me up and down with undisguised disapproval. Hi, I'm Vincent Quigley. I live at 847 Maple Grove. I got your letter yesterday and wanted to discuss it. Her expression hardened. Oh, you're the one with that disaster of a property. I was wondering when you'd show up. I forced myself to stay polite. I understand the house needs work. That's why I bought it. I'm an architect and I have renovation plans already submitted to the city. I'm starting major work next month. Next month. She shifted the dog to her other arm. That property has been an eyesore for 2 years. The previous owner let it fall completely apart, and now you've owned it for 6 months and done nothing visible. I've been working on the interior and getting permits. These things take time. Time we don't have. Do you know what happens to property values when there's a blighted house on the block? Everyone suffers. I have a responsibility to protect this neighborhood. I'm not trying to create a problem, I just need a reasonable timeline. Patricia's eyes narrowed. The timeline is in the letter. 30 days. If you can't handle homeownership responsibilities, perhaps you should sell to someone who can. My patience snapped. I'm handling them fine. I'm following all legal procedures and doing this the right way. Your letter is unreasonable. It's perfectly within the HOA's rights. You signed the covenant when you bought the property. If you don't comply, you'll be fined. Good day, Mr. Quigley. She closed the door in my face. I walked back to my house fuming. 6 months of work, all the money I had invested, and now this woman was threatening to fine me into bankruptcy before I could even start the exterior renovations. I spent the rest of the morning reading through the HOA covenant documents I had signed at closing. My real estate agent had told me they were standard, and I had been so excited about finally buying a house that I had not read them carefully. Big mistake. The covenant gave the HOA board broad authority to enforce community standards and levy fines for violations. But it also had provisions requiring the board to act reasonably and give owners adequate opportunity to remedy violations. 30 days for major exterior renovations was not reasonable by any stretch. I called my real estate lawyer, Janet Morrison, and explained the situation. "Do you have documentation of your renovation plans?" she asked. "Yes, I submitted everything to the city. I also have contractor quotes and a timeline." "Good. Write a formal response to the HOA. Explain that you're actively working on the property, provide your timeline, and request a reasonable extension based on the scope of work required. Keep it professional. If they reject it and try to fine you, we can argue they're not acting in good faith." I spent the afternoon drafting a detailed response letter. I included photos of the interior work I had completed, copies of my permit applications, the contractor's timeline showing work beginning in 4 weeks, and a polite but firm request for a 90-day extension. I sent it certified mail and emailed a copy to the HOA board address listed on their website. 2 days later, I got a 1-sentence email from Patricia. Request denied. 30-day deadline stands. Marcus came over that evening with pizza and beer. We sat on my newly refinished living room floor since I still did not have much furniture. "She's really not budging?" he asked. "Not an inch. I think she's on some kind of power trip." "So what are you going to do?" I took a long drink of beer. "I'm going to call my contractor and see if he can start earlier. Maybe I can prioritize the exterior work. It'll blow my budget, but I don't have much choice." "That sucks, man." "Yeah. But when I called my contractor, Dave Martinez, the next morning I got more bad news. "Vincent, I'd love to help you out, but I'm booked solid for the next 5 weeks. I've got 2 jobs running simultaneously right now. The earliest I could start is the date we already agreed on. Dave, I'm going to get fined $200 a day if I don't start immediately." He sighed. "Look, I can give you the name of another contractor, but anyone reputable is going to have a similar timeline. It's peak season. If you want it done fast, you'll have to hire someone less established, and I wouldn't recommend that for a project this size." I thanked him and hung up, my stomach sinking. I was trapped. Either I hired a questionable contractor and risked shoddy work that would cost more to fix later, or I took the fines and hoped I could fight them legally afterward. Then I had an idea. I was an architect. I had designed commercial buildings, office renovations, even a few custom homes for clients. Why couldn't I do more of the work myself? It would take longer and it would be exhausting, but I had the skills and I could hire day laborers for the heavy lifting. If I worked every spare minute, I might be able to make enough visible progress to get Patricia off my back. I spent the next 3 days getting my building permits expedited and buying materials. I rented scaffolding and a power washer. I hired 2 guys from a local labor agency to help with demolition and prep work. And then I started working 16-hour days. The first week was brutal. We stripped all the old paint off the exterior using the power washer and scrapers. Years of neglect had left the original cedar siding in rough shape. Some boards needed replacing entirely. I was at the lumber yard every morning at opening, picking up materials, then working until dark. My neighbors started noticing. An older couple from across the street, Tom and Deanne Chen, walked over one evening as I was cleaning up. "You're really going for it," Tom said, looking at the scaffolding and piles of materials. "HOA gave me an ultimatum," I explained. 30 days or daily fines." Deanne frowned. "That seems harsh. The house has been in bad shape for years. Patricia couldn't expect you to fix everything instantly." "Try telling her that." Tom shook his head. "She's done this before. When the Martinez family moved in 2 years ago, she tried to fine them because their moving truck blocked the street for too long. She threatened the Johnsons for having Christmas lights up past January 1st. Most people just avoid her." "I don't have that option," I said. On day 12, I was replacing rotted boards on the front porch when a car pulled up. Patricia Henderson got out, carrying a clipboard, her Pomeranian tucked under one arm. "Mr. Quigley." She walked up my driveway with the confidence of someone who believed they owned the place. "Mrs. Henderson." I did not stop working. "I'm here for my weekly inspection." "Inspection? The HOA has the right to inspect properties that are under compliance review." She gestured at my house. "I see you've started some work, but frankly, it looks worse now than before. All this mess, the scaffolding, the exposed wood, this is exactly what I was worried about." I climbed down from the porch. "It looks worse because I'm in the middle of renovations. That's how construction works. It gets messier before it gets better." "And how long will this go on?" "As long as it takes to do it right." She made notes on her clipboard. "I'm documenting this. The 30-day deadline is in 6 days. Based on what I see here, you're nowhere close to compliant. The fines will begin as scheduled." "You can't be serious." "I'm actively working on it." The covenant requires properties to be well maintained at all times, not in various states of construction chaos. "Then you should have thought about that before demanding I start renovations on an impossible timeline." Patricia's face reddened. "Don't take that tone with me. I'm trying to protect everyone's property values, including yours, whether you appreciate it or not. By fining me into bankruptcy, that's protecting me. By ensuring this neighborhood maintains its standards. If you can't afford to properly maintain a home here, perhaps you should sell and find something more within your means." She walked back to her car, and I watched her drive away, feeling my blood pressure spike. The implication that I could not afford my own house, that I did not belong in this neighborhood, was infuriating. Tom Chen was in his front yard and had witnessed the whole thing. He walked over. "She's something else," he said. "I'm going to fight this. She can't fine me for actively doing renovations. Good luck. She's gotten away with a lot over the years because most people don't want the hassle of fighting the HOA. But I was not most people." I called Janet Morrison again and told her about Patricia's inspection and threat to start fines despite obvious work in progress. "That's actually good for us," Janet said. It shows she's being unreasonable. Keep detailed records of everything you're doing, all receipts, time logs, photos. If she starts fining you, we'll take it to court if necessary. The 30-day deadline came and went. I had made significant progress, but the house was still clearly under construction. The old paint was gone, about half the siding was replaced or repaired, and I had started priming. But it was not finished. 3 days later, I got another pink envelope. A fine notice for $600, covering 3 days at $200 per day, with a warning that fines would continue daily until the property was compliant. I was done being polite. I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board requesting a hearing to dispute the fines. Iowa law required HOAs to provide due process before enforcing penalties. I also started documenting everything Patricia did. Every inspection, every conversation, every threatening letter. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, which meant more fines would accumulate. In the meantime, I kept working on the house. I was exhausted, running on coffee and determination, but the place was starting to transform. The new siding was up. The fresh paint was going on. I had repaired the front porch and installed new railings. I replaced the old windows with energy-efficient ones that matched the original style. The yard was cleaned up, and I had hired a landscaping crew to handle the overgrown bushes and plant new flowers. My neighbors started commenting on the improvements. Deanne Chen brought over homemade cookies one afternoon. "The house looks wonderful," she said. "We've been watching the transformation. You're doing such beautiful work." "Thank you. I just hope the HOA board recognizes that at the hearing." "Is Patricia still giving you trouble?" "Thousands of dollars in fines at this point." Deanne looked troubled. "That woman needs to be stopped. She's made this neighborhood miserable for too many people." The night before the HOA hearing, I prepared my presentation. I had photos documenting every stage of the renovation, receipts for all materials and labor, copies of permits, the contractor's original timeline showing why immediate work had been impossible, and a detailed explanation of everything I had accomplished in the past 6 weeks, working essentially around the clock. The hearing was held at the Community Center Clubhouse. The HOA board consisted of 5 members. Patricia Henderson as president, a retired dentist named Frank Morrison as treasurer, a real estate agent named Susan Parker as secretary, and 2 general members named Michael Torres and Jennifer Wu. I arrived early and set up my laptop to show the photo documentation. About 20 neighbors showed up too, which surprised me. Tom and Deanne were there, along with several other people I had only met in passing. Patricia called the meeting to order with obvious irritation at the crowd. "This is a board hearing, not a public forum," she said. "HOA hearings are supposed to be open to members," Tom Chen called out from the back. "It says so in the bylaws." Patricia's jaw tightened, but she did not argue. "Fine. We're here to discuss the matter of 847 Maple Grove and the fines assessed against Vincent Quigley for covenant violations. Mr. Quigley, you have 30 minutes to present your case." I stood up and walked to the front. "Thank you. I bought my house 6 months ago knowing it needed significant renovation. I'm an architect, and I had a detailed plan to restore the property properly. I submitted permits to the city and hired a licensed contractor scheduled to begin work in July. Then I received an HOA letter giving me 30 days to complete all exterior work or face $200 daily fines. I pulled up the first photos on the screen showing the house when I bought it. This was the condition of the property at purchase. Yes, it needed work. But I was following all proper legal procedures. When I explained this to Mrs. Henderson and requested a reasonable extension, I was denied. So I took matters into my own hands and started the work myself. I showed the progression of photos, the power washing, the siding repair, the painting, the new windows, the landscaping. The transformation was dramatic. This is the house today. In 6 weeks, working essentially full-time while also trying to maintain my actual job, I've completely transformed the exterior. The work is not quite finished, but it's about 90% complete. I've done this while being fined daily, which now totals over $4,000. Several neighbors nodded and whispered among themselves. Even some of the board members looked impressed. My point is this. I was always going to do these renovations. I had plans, permits, and contractors ready. But I was given an impossible deadline and threatened with fines that could have bankrupted me. Instead of helping a new homeowner improve the neighborhood, this board chose to harass and penalize me. That's not what an HOA should do. Patricia stood up. Are you finished? Yes. First of all, the 30-day deadline was entirely reasonable. You had owned the property for 6 months and done nothing visible to improve it. Second, the covenant clearly states that properties must be well maintained at all times. Yours was not. Third, these fines are meant to ensure compliance, which they did. You started working because of the fines. Without them, who knows how long you would have delayed. I would have started exactly when my contractor was available, I said. The work would have been done by professionals and finished properly. Instead, I had to rush and do much of it myself, risking mistakes. But you didn't make mistakes, Susan Parker spoke up for the first time. I drove by your house last week. It looks fantastic. Honestly, it's one of the best renovations I've seen in years. Patricia shot her a look. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Michael Torres asked. The house is improved, the neighborhood looks better, and we've collected thousands in fines. What are we even arguing about? We're arguing about enforcement of community standards, Patricia said. If we let one person ignore the timeline, everyone will think they can take their time with repairs. Tom Chen stood up from the audience. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I've seen property values go up and down. You know what actually hurts values? HOAs that harass homeowners and create hostile environments. Vincent has done more to improve this street in 6 weeks than anyone has done in 5 years, and you're punishing him for it. Several other neighbors voiced agreement. This isn't a debate, Patricia snapped. The board will deliberate and issue a decision within 5 business days. Actually, Frank Morrison cleared his throat. I think we should vote now. The facts are pretty clear. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Jennifer Wu nodded. I agree. Let's vote. Fine, Patricia said through gritted teeth. All in favor of upholding the fines. Only Patricia raised her hand. Against. The other 4 board members raised their hands. Patricia's face went red. This is a mistake. You're setting a dangerous precedent. No, Frank said quietly. We're correcting an unreasonable enforcement action. Vincent, the fines are vacated. I'd also like to personally apologize for the stress this has caused. Your renovation work is exceptional. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. The meeting adjourned and several neighbors came up to congratulate me and look at my phone photos of the house. Tom Chen shook my hand. That took guts, he said. Patricia's not going to forget this. I don't care. I'm just glad I can finish the work without drowning in fines. But Tom was right. Patricia did not forget. Over the next 2 weeks, I completed the final exterior touches. I finished painting, installed new gutters, and put up period-appropriate house numbers. I planted a small garden along the front walkway and added landscape lighting. The house went from the neighborhood eyesore to what several people told me was the best-looking property on the street. Then the letters started. First, Patricia sent a citation because my new house numbers were a quarter-inch taller than the covenant specified. Then she claimed my mailbox was 2 inches forward of the property line. Then she said my exterior light fixtures were too bright and disturbed neighbors. Each letter threatened fines. I documented every frivolous complaint and responded formally each time, citing the relevant codes showing I was in compliance. After the 5th bogus citation, I called Janet Morrison again. "She's harassing you," Janet said bluntly. "This is retaliation for challenging her authority. Keep records of everything. If it continues, we may need to pursue legal action against her personally." But before it came to that, something unexpected happened. I was working in my home office one afternoon when my doorbell rang. A woman in her 30s stood on my porch holding a folder. "Vincent Quigley. I'm Laura Edwards, a reporter with the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I'm doing a story on HOA overreach and heard about your situation. Would you be willing to talk?" I hesitated. "How did you hear about it?" "Susan Parker reached out to me. She's on your HOA board and thinks what Patricia Henderson has been doing needs public scrutiny." I invited her in and told her the whole story. She took notes and photos of the house, both the before pictures and current state. "This is exactly the kind of thing people need to know about," Laura said. "HOAs can do a lot of good, but when they're run by petty tyrants, they make homeownership a nightmare." "I just wanted to fix up my house," I said. "I didn't want drama. That's always how it starts." The article ran 2 weeks later on the front page of the local section. "HOA President's Personal Vendetta Leads to $4,000 in Fines for Home Improvement," was the headline, with before and after photos of my house. The article detailed Patricia's unreasonable deadline, the fine accumulation despite obvious work in progress, and the board overturning her decision. It also mentioned her subsequent retaliation with frivolous citations. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Gazette's website comments section filled with people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Local news stations picked up the story. By the end of the week, a local TV station was parked outside my house asking for an interview. Patricia Henderson was suddenly facing public criticism, and she did not handle it well. She sent a neighborhood-wide email claiming the media coverage was biased and inaccurate, and that I had manipulated the story to avoid accountability. She called an emergency HOA meeting to address the false narrative being spread about the board. The meeting was packed. Probably 50 homeowners showed up, many of whom had never attended an HOA meeting before. Patricia tried to control the narrative, but she kept getting interrupted by angry residents sharing their own stories of her overreach. One woman talked about being fined because her daughter's pink bicycle was visible from the street. A man described getting cited for parking his car in his own driveway because it was a pickup truck, and the covenant specified passenger vehicles only. A young couple explained how Patricia had tried to prevent them from installing a wheelchair ramp for their disabled son because it altered the home's exterior profile. The meeting devolved into chaos, with Patricia yelling for order while homeowners shouted over her. Finally, Frank Morrison stood up. "Patricia, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence. Your leadership has become a liability to this community." "You can't do that," Patricia said, but her voice wavered. "I can and I am. It's in the bylaws." "Any board member can call for a leadership vote with cause. We have cause." He looked around at the crowd. "We have a lot of cause." The vote was held the following week with all HOA members eligible to participate. Patricia Henderson was removed as president by a margin of 73%. Frank Morrison became the new president, and one of his first acts was issuing a formal apology to me and several other homeowners who had been targeted by Patricia's enforcement overreach. I thought that was the end of it. My house was finished and looked beautiful. The neighborhood had new HOA leadership. Patricia was no longer in power. Everything should have been fine. But then things got weird. I started noticing Patricia driving by my house multiple times a day, always slowing down to stare. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but then my neighbors noticed too. "She's obsessed with your place," Deanne Chen told me. "Tom saw her parked across the street the other evening, just sitting in her car looking at your house." "That's creepy." "It is. Be careful." One morning I woke up to find paint splattered on my newly renovated front porch. It was clearly deliberate, big streaks of black paint across the white railings and steps. I immediately called the police and filed a report. The officer who responded was sympathetic, but honest. "Without cameras or witnesses, it's hard to prove who did this. You have any enemies?" "Just my former HOA president." He raised an eyebrow. "I saw the news story. You think she'd really go that far?" "At this point, I don't know what she'd do." I spent $200 installing security cameras around my property. 3 days later, they caught Patricia Henderson sneaking into my yard at 2 in the morning and spray painting obscenities on my fence. I called the police immediately and provided the video footage. They arrested Patricia the next morning for criminal mischief and trespassing. She was charged, fingerprinted, and released on bail. The story made the news again, this time with security footage screenshots showing Patricia's face clearly visible as she vandalized my property. The Cedar Rapids Gazette ran a follow-up article. Patricia became infamous locally as the HOA Karen who couldn't let go of her power trip, but it still was not over. 2 weeks after her arrest, I received a notice that Patricia was suing me for defamation, claiming my media interviews had damaged her reputation and cost her real estate business clients. The lawsuit was for $50,000. Janet Morrison reviewed the lawsuit and shook her head. "This is frivolous. You told the truth, you have documentation, and her reputation was damaged by her own actions, not your statements. We'll file a motion to dismiss, and honestly, you should countersue for harassment." We filed a response and a countersuit for the cost of repairs to my vandalized property, installation of security equipment, legal fees, and emotional distress. The total came to $12,000. The case dragged on for months. Patricia's lawyer tried various tactics to make it difficult, but ultimately the judge was not sympathetic to her claims. In a hearing, the judge reviewed all the evidence including the security footage, the HOA meeting minutes, the documented frivolous citations, and the media coverage. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said, "you engaged in a pattern of harassment against Mr. Quigley that culminated in criminal activity. Your lawsuit has no merit. Motion to dismiss granted. Furthermore, I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Quigley's countersuit. You are ordered to pay $12,000 in damages plus legal fees." Patricia looked stunned. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she just sat there frozen. The judge continued, "I'm also granting a restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Quigley's property at all times. Any violation will result in immediate arrest." Outside the courthouse, Patricia's mask finally cracked. She started screaming at me in the parking lot, calling me every name she could think of, until her lawyer physically pulled her away. I felt exhausted but vindicated. It had been 8 months since I bought the house, and what should have been an exciting renovation project had turned into a nightmare of legal battles and harassment. But at least it was finally over. The check from Patricia arrived 6 weeks later after her lawyer confirmed she had paid the full judgment amount. I used part of it to upgrade my landscaping, and the rest went into savings to replenish what I had spent on legal fees and rushed renovations. My house had become something of a local landmark. People would occasionally drive by slowly, and I would see them taking photos. The Cedar Rapids Gazette did a follow-up feature article 6 months after the initial story, this time focusing on the completed renovation rather than the HOA drama. Historic craftsman restoration shows what's possible when homeowners are supported, not attacked, was the headline. Laura Edwards came back and did a full photo spread of the house, inside and out. The article highlighted the original woodwork I had restored, the period-appropriate fixtures I had installed, and the careful attention to maintaining the home's historic character while updating its functionality. The response was overwhelming. I got emails from other homeowners asking for advice on their own renovations. A local historic preservation society featured my house on their annual tour. I even picked up several new architecture clients who had seen the coverage and wanted someone with my attention to detail and period knowledge. The most surprising outcome was that my renovation seemed to inspire the entire neighborhood. Within a year, 3 other families on my street had started their own exterior improvement projects. Tom and Deanne Chen updated their landscaping and repainted their house. The family 2 doors down replaced their roof and windows. Even some of the already well-maintained homes got fresh upgrades. Property values in the neighborhood increased by an average of 14% over the following 18 months, according to a local real estate analysis. The Cedar Rapids Gazette did yet another follow-up article about how one renovation had sparked a neighborhood-wide revitalization. Frank Morrison, now firmly established as the sensible HOA president, publicly credited my house as the catalyst. Vincent showed everyone what was possible when you invest in these beautiful old homes, he said in an interview. Instead of letting them decline, we're now seeing a real renaissance on this street. Patricia Henderson moved away quietly about a year after the court judgment. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she relocated to Arizona to live with her daughter. Her house sold within a week, and the new owners were a lovely young family who introduced themselves warmly and showed no interest in HOA politics. The new family, Jason and Michelle Rogers with their 2 kids, knocked on my door a month after moving in. "We wanted to thank you," Michelle said. "We almost didn't buy in this neighborhood because we heard horror stories about the HOA. But when we saw your house and read about what you'd done, we knew things were different now. Your renovation is what made us take the chance." "That means a lot," I said, genuinely touched. "We're planning some updates too," Jason added. "Nothing as dramatic as yours, but we'd love your advice if you have time. We heard you're an architect." I ended up consulting on their renovation plans pro bono. It felt good to help someone else avoid the mistakes and stress I had gone through. Their project went smoothly with proper planning, and the new, reasonable HOA board that actually supported homeowners instead of harassing them. 2 years after I bought my house, I was sitting on my front porch one evening watching the sunset. The porch I had rebuilt myself during those frantic weeks of 16-hour days. The railings I had painted while worrying about accumulating fines. The yard I had landscaped while dealing with Patricia's escalating harassment. It had been worth it. Every exhausting hour, every dollar spent, every stressful confrontation. The house was everything I had hoped it would be when I first saw the listing. The neighborhood had transformed from a place of declining properties and hostile HOA enforcement to a thriving community of homeowners who actually cared about each other. Marcus came over with his girlfriend Sarah that evening. We grilled on my new back deck and talked about their plans to buy a house themselves. "Just avoid HOAs," Marcus joked. "Not all HOAs are bad," I said. "Just the ones run by people like Patricia. Find a place with a reasonable board or no HOA at all." "Your place really does look incredible," Sarah said. "I saw the before pictures online. I can't believe it's the same house." "Sometimes the best things require the most work," I said. A car pulled up across the street, and I tensed for a moment, old instincts from the months of Patricia's stalking. But it was just the Rogers family returning from soccer practice. The kids waved as they got out, and I waved back. The neighborhood had become what I hoped it would be when I first moved in, a real community. People knew each other. They helped each other. The HOA existed to maintain common areas and handle administrative necessities, not to terrorize residents with power trips and arbitrary enforcement. Frank Morrison stopped by one weekend while I was working in my garden. He had taken his role as HOA president seriously, implementing actual reforms. Under his leadership, the board had rewritten several covenant provisions to be more reasonable, established clear appeal processes, and created a community improvement fund that gave small grants to homeowners doing renovations. "You inspired a lot of this," Frank told me, gesturing at the papers he was carrying about the new HOA policies. "When I saw what Patricia did to you and how you fought back, it made me realize we needed systemic changes. One person shouldn't be able to abuse power like that." "I appreciate what you've done. It makes a real difference." "There's something else," Frank said. "The board wants to formally recognize your contribution to the neighborhood. We're giving you an award at the next community meeting. I know it might feel silly after everything, but we want to acknowledge that your renovation really did raise the whole neighborhood. Property values are up, people are investing in their homes again, and we have a wait list of people who want to move here. That's because of you." The community meeting was held on a warm June evening in the neighborhood park. It was well attended, transformed from the mandatory obligation people used to dread into an actual social event. Kids played on the playground while adults chatted and ate potluck food. When Frank called me up to present the award, I felt genuinely emotional. He gave a speech about how one person's commitment to doing things right, even in the face of unreasonable opposition, can transform an entire community. The award was a plaque with a photo of my renovated house and an inscription that read, "For excellence in historic preservation and community leadership." I looked out at the faces of my neighbors, many of whom had supported me during the worst of the Patricia situation. Tom and Deanne Chen were there, smiling. Susan Parker, the board member who had contacted the media, gave me a thumbs up. The Rogers family was there with their kids. Even some people I barely knew were applauding. "Thank you," I said, holding the plaque. "When I bought my house, I just wanted a place to call home. I didn't expect any of this drama or attention. But I learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, matters. And I learned that most people are fundamentally good and will support you when you need it. This neighborhood is special because of all of you, not because of me." More applause, and then the meeting moved on to other business. I stayed afterward talking with neighbors, feeling like I had finally found the community I had been hoping for when I started house hunting all those years ago. My architecture business continued to grow, fueled partly by the publicity but mostly by word-of-mouth referrals. I specialized in historic renovations and had clients throughout Iowa and neighboring states. The work was fulfilling in a way my previous commercial projects had never been. I was helping people restore beautiful old buildings and preserve architectural heritage. I also started teaching weekend workshops on historic home renovation through the local community college. The classes were always full, packed with eager homeowners who wanted to learn how to properly restore their properties. I taught them about maintaining original features, sourcing period-appropriate materials, and working with local preservation codes. During one class, a student raised her hand. "Isn't it expensive to do renovations the right way like you did?" "It can be," I admitted. "But it's more expensive to do it wrong and have to fix mistakes. And if you do it yourself when possible, you save a lot on labor." I did probably 60% of my exterior work myself. It was exhausting, but it saved tens of thousands of dollars. "What about dealing with HOAs?" another student asked. I laughed. "That's a whole separate workshop. But the key is knowing your rights, documenting everything, and not being afraid to stand up to unreasonable demands." Most HOA boards are reasonable. The problem is when one person has too much power and no oversight. After class, several students came up with specific questions about their own renovation projects. I found myself becoming an unofficial mentor to a small community of historic home enthusiasts in Cedar Rapids. We even started a monthly meetup where people could share their projects and ask for advice. 3 years after I bought my house, the neighborhood held a home tour fundraiser for the local elementary school. 5 houses participated, including mine. I spent the week before making sure everything was spotless, arranging flowers from my garden, and preparing information sheets about the renovation process. The day of the tour was perfect, sunny and warm with a light breeze. Hundreds of people came through, walking from house to house, admiring the variety of architectural styles and renovation approaches. My house was the last stop on the tour, and I stood in the living room answering questions. "How long did the whole renovation take?" someone asked. "The exterior was done in about 3 months, but I'm still doing interior work. Historic renovation is never really finished. There's always something to improve or restore." "Do you have any regrets about buying a fixer-upper?" I thought about the question carefully. The HOA situation was horrible at the time. I wouldn't wish that stress on anyone. But ultimately, no, I don't regret it. This house has given me so much more than I expected. Not just a home, but a community, a business focus, and a sense of purpose. Sometimes the hard things are the most rewarding. An older woman in the back of the group spoke up. "I remember when this house was falling apart. Everyone thought it should be torn down. What you've done is remarkable. You saved a piece of our neighborhood's history." "That's what it's really about," I said. "These old houses have stories. They're part of our architectural heritage. When we let them decay or tear them down, we lose those stories. I'm just glad I could preserve this one." That evening after the tour ended, I sat on my front porch again with a beer, watching the last visitors walk back to their cars. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the newly renovated houses on my street. The neighborhood looked vibrant and cared for, a far cry from the declining block I had moved to 3 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Saw the news coverage of the home tour. Your house looked amazing. Proud of you, man." I smiled and texted back thanks. Then I just sat there, enjoying the quiet evening and reflecting on the journey. The legal settlement money from Patricia had long since been spent on further improvements. I had upgraded the kitchen, renovated both bathrooms, and finished the basement into a home office. Every room maintained the historic character while incorporating modern functionality. It was exactly what I had envisioned when I first walked through the property. But the real value was not in the house itself. It was in what the house represented. The importance of standing up to bullies, the power of community support, and the impact one person can have by refusing to accept unreasonable treatment. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering if she ever reflected on what happened and why. Probably not. People like her rarely saw themselves as the villain in the story. But I hoped she had found peace in Arizona, away from the HOA politics that had consumed her. The restraining order was still technically in effect, though it no longer mattered with Patricia living halfway across the country. I had not heard from her in over 2 years, and that was fine with me. That chapter was closed. Frank Morrison's term as HOA president was coming to an end, and he had announced he would not seek another term. The neighborhood was looking for new leadership, and several people had approached me about running for the board. I declined. I had no interest in HOA politics, even the reformed version we had now. My contribution to the neighborhood was the renovation itself and the ripple effect it created. That was enough. Instead, a younger couple, both lawyers, stepped up to run for board positions. They were smart, fair-minded, and committed to maintaining the reasonable policies Frank had implemented. They won easily, and the neighborhood continued to thrive under their leadership. 4 years after I bought the house, I met someone. Her name was Lisa Emerson, and she was a history professor at a local college. We met at one of my renovation workshops, where she was researching historic preservation for a book she was writing about Iowa architecture. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of old buildings and craftsmanship. She appreciated the work I had done on my house and understood the historical significance of preserving these structures. 6 months into dating, she moved in. A year after that, I proposed on the front porch I had rebuilt with my own hands during those frantic weeks fighting the HOA. She said yes without hesitation. "I love this house," she told me, looking around at the restored craftsman details. "But more than that, I love what you did to protect it. You stood up for what was right even when it was hard. That says everything about who you are." We got married in the backyard, under string lights hung from the trees I had planted. The entire neighborhood came. Tom and Deanne Chen brought an enormous cake. Frank Morrison officiated since he was a retired judge. Even Marcus gave an embarrassing best man speech about how I had obsessed over paint colors and original door hardware for months. It was perfect. Lisa's books and academic papers gradually filled the built-in shelves I had restored. Her vintage typewriter collection found a home in the sunroom I had renovated. We adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Harvey who loved sleeping on the original hardwood floors I had refinished. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I worked on architecture projects from my home office. Lisa taught her classes and worked on her research. We hosted neighborhood potlucks and game nights. The house that had once been threatened with daily fines was now the heart of our community's social life. 5 years after buying the house, I was featured in a national architecture magazine. The article was about successful historic renovations done by owner architects, and my house was highlighted as a prime example. The writer had done extensive research, interviewing neighbors about the transformation and documenting the HOA drama that had sparked everything. The article's conclusion stuck with me. Vincent Quigley's Renovation proves that historic preservation is not just about maintaining old buildings. It's about understanding that our homes exist within communities, and improving one property can catalyze positive change throughout an entire neighborhood. Sometimes the greatest resistance comes from unexpected places, but perseverance and commitment to doing things right ultimately prevails. The magazine spread the story far beyond Cedar Rapids. I got emails from people across the country sharing their own HOA horror stories and asking for advice. I connected several of them with good real estate lawyers. Some sent updates later about successfully fighting unreasonable boards or implementing reforms in their own communities. One email particularly touched me. It was from a young couple in Vermont who had been threatened with fines for renovating a historic barn on their property. They had read my story and decided to fight back instead of giving in. They won their case and thanked me for the inspiration. "You showed us that standing up to bullies is worth it," they wrote. "Our barn is now beautiful and our HOA has new leadership. Thank you for sharing your story." That was what made all the stress worthwhile. Not just my own house and neighborhood, but the ripple effects reaching people I would never meet in places I had never been. 6 years after buying the house, Lisa and I learned she was pregnant. We spent months preparing the small bedroom upstairs for a nursery, carefully preserving the original crown molding and window trim while painting the walls a soft yellow. I built a custom crib that matched the craftsman style of the house. Our daughter was born on a snowy January morning. We named her Rose, after the original owner of our house, whose name we had discovered in old property records at the county clerk's office. Rose had lived in the house from 1922 to 1968, raising 4 children and hosting countless neighborhood gatherings. Bringing baby Rose home to the house I had fought so hard to preserve felt like closing a circle. This was not just about renovation or property values or HOA battles. It was about creating a home with history and meaning, a place where new stories could be written while honoring the old ones. Tom and Diane Chen came by to meet the baby, bringing gifts and stories about their own children who had grown up on this street decades ago. "This neighborhood needed someone like you," Diane told me, holding baby Rose. "Someone who saw the potential in these old houses and was willing to fight for them. Look what you started." She gestured out the window at the street where multiple houses now sported fresh paint, updated landscaping, and careful historic renovations. The neighborhood that had once been declining was now one of the most desirable in Cedar Rapids. "I just wanted to fix up my house," I said, repeating what had become my standard line. "And you changed everything," Tom added. "That's how it works. One person willing to stand up makes it possible for everyone else to do the same." As they left, I sat in the rocking chair in Rose's nursery, my daughter sleeping in my arms, and thought about everything that had happened since I first got that pink HOA envelope in my mailbox. The threats, the fines, the harassment, the legal battles, the eventual victory and vindication. It had all led here, to this moment of peace in a house I had saved and a neighborhood I had helped revitalize. The property that Patricia Henderson claimed was lowering values had instead raised the entire community, both literally in terms of property prices and figuratively in terms of spirit and pride. The morning light came through the restored original windows, casting patterns on the refinished floors. Outside, I could hear neighbors walking their dogs and kids riding bikes, the sounds of a healthy, thriving community. My daughter stirred in my arms, and I looked down at her tiny face. She would grow up in this house, running on the same floors that children had played on for over a century. She would learn the value of fighting for what's right, of standing up to bullies, and of the importance of community and preservation. The HOA drama that had once consumed my life was now just a story we would tell, a cautionary tale with a happy ending. Patricia Henderson was a distant memory, her attempts to destroy what I was building completely reversed. The house stood strong and beautiful, a testament to what happens when someone refuses to give up on their vision despite overwhelming opposition. Every room told a story of restoration and perseverance. Every original detail I had preserved was a small victory against the forces that wanted to tear it down or force me out. I thought about all the people who had supported me along the way. Marcus, who brought pizza and listened to me vent during the worst of it. Janet Morrison, the lawyer who helped me fight back legally. Tom and Deanne Chen, who stood up at that crucial HOA meeting. Susan Parker, who contacted the media. Frank Morrison, who led the vote to remove Patricia from power. Laura Edwards, the reporter who told my story. All the neighbors who showed up to support me at hearings and meetings. None of this would have been possible without them. The house was my project, but the victory belonged to the entire community. Lisa came into the nursery carrying coffee. "How's our girl?" "Perfect," I said. "Just thinking about everything it took to get here. Worth it. Every single moment." She sat in the chair next to me, and we watched our daughter sleep in the house that almost destroyed me but ultimately gave me everything. The house that an HOA president said would lower property values but instead raised an entire neighborhood. Years from now, when Rose was old enough to understand, I would tell her the whole story about buying a rundown house and having a vision for what it could be. About an unreasonable HOA president who tried to fine me into giving up. About working 16-hour days to meet an impossible deadline. About fighting back against harassment and vandalism. About a community coming together to support what was right. But most importantly, I would tell her about perseverance. About how sometimes doing the right thing is hard and expensive and exhausting, but it's worth it. About how one person standing up to injustice can inspire others to do the same. About how creating something beautiful and meaningful takes time and effort and commitment. The house would be her inheritance, not just the physical structure but the story behind it. A reminder that home is not just about four walls and a roof. It's about community, history, and the willingness to fight for something you believe in. Outside, the neighborhood continued its transformation, house by house, family by family. The street that had once been declining was now thriving. The HOA that had been a source of fear and stress was now a functional organization that actually served its members. And my house, the one Patricia Henderson claimed was lowering everyone's property values, stood at the center of it all. A beautiful craftsman bungalow restored to its original glory, proving that sometimes the thing everyone wants to tear down is actually the catalyst that lifts everyone up. I had bought a house. I had renovated it against incredible opposition. I had stood up to harassment and fought back against injustice. And in doing so, I had not just saved my own property, but helped revitalize an entire neighborhood. That was worth more than any property value calculation could measure.